I'm delighted to be joined today by the Spectator's deputy US editor, Kate Andrews. Not much longer of this parish, I'm sad to say. Kate will be leaving us for the Washington Post quite soon. We're, of course, very resentful and bitter about this, but publicly wishing her all the best. Before we get started, I want to tell you about a very exciting event that is coming up. It's another Americano Live. We've done 2 so far, and they've both been great successes, and I'm very confident this next one will be. It's with the great Ann Coulter, who's coming over from America especially for it, and it will be on Monday, the 3rd of November at the Emmanuel Centre in central London. To book your ticket or tickets, please click on the link on the description below, or if, like me, you're very old-fashioned, you can type spectator.co.uk/Americano events, and you'll see the page there. Kate, we're going to talk about Trump's pretty phenomenal week, I think it's fair to say. Trump has had many phenomenal weeks in his life, but this one, it seems that he's on a roll. We had the Gaza, his trip to Gaza his trip to Israel on Monday, speech to the Israeli Knesset. Then he goes to Egypt, Sharm el Sheikh, meets the world leaders, and it really did look like a sort of fanboy club for Donald Trump. All these leaders queuing up to get their moment with Donald Trump. And I had an interesting text from a friend this morning who's quite careful with his political opinions, and he said, "I no longer have to hide my love for Donald Trump. The stigma has gone." And I think there are quite a few people in the world that are thinking like that, don't you?
I think there certainly are people who, as the second term continues on, feel more confident to express their support for the president, particularly because of his foreign policy. And as you and I have discussed on many occasions, Freddy, I think for a lot of people, Trump skeptics included, like myself, his foreign policy has always been an area since his first term that is, I'm always hesitant to make sweeping statements about Donald Trump like your friend did, because I think that's going to jinx it. But generally speaking, on foreign policy, it's hard to name a better foreign policy from another president over, say, 25, 30 years. I can't ever put my finger on what it actually is, because on the one hand, he's at least creating ceasefires, hopefully ending wars in the Middle East. On the other hand, he's getting more actively involved in Venezuela, which perhaps we can come on to. So it isn't that it's isolationist. It really isn't. But he doesn't like it when young men and women die unnecessarily. And that really should be a baseline, you would really hope, for any elected politician, any leader, but unfortunately it hasn't been. And his true disgust for unnecessary death means that we get moments like we got this week, where we see 20 hostages returned to their families in Israel, where you see what appears so far to be a real ceasefire and a pause in the mass death and destruction that we have seen for Israelis and for Palestinians. So I think that, this is certainly a triumphant moment for the president. And you can tell that he's in a great mood. And I wrote about this last year leading up to the election, that when things are going well for Donald Trump, he gets funny. When things are going well for Donald Trump, the far more charming aspects of his personality, and frankly, the reason I think he won the election, start to come out. Because when he's down in the dumps, when the poll numbers aren't great, when he doesn't feel like he's on the up, when he's not winning in his terms, he's pretty nasty, he's vindictive, he's angry. But this week, we've just seen so many hilarious things come out of this man's mouth about not being Beachbody ready compared to Joe Biden, about how very Mean Girl style, how he likes some of the world leaders and how he doesn't, and we might find out who.
All just started coming together. I've known so many of you for so long. You're friends of mine. You're great people. I have a couple I don't like in particular, but I won't tell you who. I have actually a few of them I don't like at all, but you'll never find out who they are. Well, maybe you will, come to think of it. But I have most of you who I like a lot, and I respect a lot. Maybe that's more important. We listen.
This is genuinely hilarious stuff, and you can tell that the president knows that he's having a great week, that he's on a roll, if you will. And I do think that's the kind of Donald Trump that his supporters, particularly his quiet ones, are much more likely to come out and say that they support, as your friend did to you this week, Freddy.
Well, I can't help thinking, though, that when I was in Washington, you were there too a couple of weeks ago. Speaking to some people who are involved in the administration, there's a little bit of fear about hubris going on among them, because on the domestic front, there are clouds on the horizon. There are even clouds overhead. You have economic news there's some alarming indicators, although Trump will never admit that. There are obviously the riots going on in the cities carrying on, and some people think that's politically advantageous to Trump, but presumably if it carries on unresolved, or the administration doesn't seem to have a clear handle on it, that's going to be a political headache for Trump. And there's a kind of a general unease. There's a government shutdown still ongoing. Again, Trump seems to be getting the better of it politically at the moment. The Democrats seem to be getting the brunt of the blame. But these things can't kind of linger on forever without somebody saying, well, hold on, he is supposed to be this amazingly dynamic commander-in-chief, and there is quite a lot of rot going on at home.
No, I think that's exactly right. And the economy will be the number one concern, because for all of their talk about how tariffs aren't taxes and how tariffs are bringing in
surcharges.
Hundreds of
They're surcharges.
surcharges.
That's what Scott Bessent will tell you.
I mean, I can't help but just go back to the Obama era, where he was insistent that Obamacare wasn't going to be a tax. And the reason it was upheld by the Supreme Court was, in fact, because it was a tax. It's very, very painful for a president to eventually have to come out and admit that something was a tax when they promised it wouldn't be. And I fear Trump has been setting himself up for a very, very similar kind of fall. Now, yes, Obamacare was popular amongst many people, but the idea that they're being told something isn't a tax when people know that they're paying that tax in one version or another is deeply frustrating to the American people. But it's also becoming very clear that the companies that were trying to protect their consumers from these rising prices are not going to be able to do that forever. The tariff battle has only just begun, and Trump is continuing to try to escalate it with countries like China. So, that's going to come to a head. As you say, the deliberate attempt to ramp up the aggression and the standoff in some of America's major cities is going to come to a head. You can tell that Trump and his allies are so excited for Zohran Mamdani to be elected in New York City next month, which looks very, very, very likely to happen, because that's the political enemy that they want. I think there's certainly a strong sense among others that you should be very careful what you wish for as you expose Americans to more of these sort of radically left and right-wing ideological perspectives, and as you pit them against each other without any real attempt for compromise or trying to. It's not even about the middle. It's about finding solutions to the very real problems that Americans face, like escalating healthcare costs and higher costs for the things that they were trying to buy that were being imported from abroad. You don't necessarily have to take a centrist position, but just this desperate attempt to ramp up the politics of it and that standoff nature is not necessarily going to get us to the solutions we need. And then, of course, the fact that Trump keeps so radically meddling in key institutions. Now he's set his sights on the IRS and changes that he wants to make to be able to go after more leftist leaning groups. Again, we don't have to go back that far to when Tea Party people and groups were targeted by the IRS under Democrats. This is not how Americans want their systems to be used. They do not like the idea of people in power being able to use really serious and strong and well-funded institutions to go after political opponents. So all of that stuff, it more than lingers, Freddie. It's incredibly prominent. Maybe perhaps that's why Trump is celebrating his win on the international stage so much this week, because it is a genuine win. And there may not be many to point to for some time to come, as he has to come back home and he has to deal with all the issues here, many of which he is very deliberately contributing to, thinking that he's going to win the overall, the bigger fight. But, what if he doesn't? That's going to be much trickier for him to navigate than what he's just got to do this week.
And one of the most interesting developments within Republican politics of the last few days has been that Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Georgia congresswoman, has come out far more vocally in her criticisms of the Trump-Vance agenda.
And I'm talking to major manufacturing companies they're saying we support the president, we support what he's trying, his long-term goal, but we're having problems with these tariffs. And now we're having problems. We can't get supplies from this country and we can't get supplies from this country. And there's problems, but have regular people's bank accounts been affected? Has the stress come off? No, that has not happened yet. And that needs to be the major focus. It shouldn't be about helping your crypto donors or your AI donors or welcoming in these people that hated you and spent money to try to beat you, but all of a sudden are excited to come out to the new Rose Garden patio.
Yes.
That shouldn't be the focus. The focus should be the people that showed up at the rallies, stood there for freaking 18 hours trying to get in the rain, in the cold, in the 100-degree heat. For those people, those are the ones that I care about. Those are the ones that voted for not only the president, but every single Republican, gave us power. I don't think those people are being served.
This is sort of going after Trump from the right. And it's fair to say it has some purchase, doesn't it, on the kind of the Trumpist movement?
Oh, I think it certainly does. Some of the biggest critics over the past couple of months of Donald Trump have been his own very loyal, very dedicated base, particularly with the Epstein files, because they were built up so much by Donald Trump himself before he found himself back in office. It is those very loyal MAGA supporters who have been the most frustrated and who have been the loudest in calling for more information to be put into the public domain. And regardless of what you think of that topic, or regardless of whether or not you actually think there is more information to put out there, it is his base that are most critical of the fact that they have not been as forthcoming as they once promised to be. So I think Marjorie Taylor Greene's interventions are really quite significant. Now, is she really going to be that Republican counterweight to MAGA? Because we know that the Republican Party has been split on a myriad of topics, Donald Trump being the biggest one for many, many years now. She's not a never Trumper. She's not going to be the kind of person who comes at this from what about the good old days of Ronald Reagan? But her criticisms, I think, will be listened to because it isn't just her and some right-wingers who feel this way. It's also large parts of independents and Democrats who are asking similar questions about taxes and about healthcare. And that is what she really honed in on over the past couple of days. She's talking about escalating healthcare costs, and she's talking about the fact that people are going to be impacted from rising prices. And there have also been some comments and some shots taken in what she's sort of describing as an all-boys club. This idea that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and all of these boys at the top treat the men one way and the women another. And you have had people asking, oh gosh, is she a Democrat now? These are the kinds of talking points that you might hear from the left. She's definitely not. I think it's interesting that this is coming from the right. And perhaps, I don't want to say it was inevitable. It all comes down to the personalities involved. But when you do take the very bullish approach that Donald Trump has decided to take to a second term, and we know why, right? In his first term, he feels like there were a lot of missed opportunities. He wasn't prepared. This time, he's come in guns blazing. That can rub your supporters up the wrong way, not just your opponents.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, 2028, but for the Democrats, is an interesting suggestion.
It's an interesting suggestion.
Also
how's she going to do in a primary?
Course.
I wonder how she'd fare in a primary, but weirder things have happened.
It doesn't make any sense at all. But I think, speaking of the Democrats, the reason why Trump is on this roll and has been really for since the election and arguably before is because the Democrats are in such disarray, quite clearly, and they don't know how to attack him. On tariffs, they don't want to sound like the neoliberal party. On healthcare, which should be a winning issue for them, they don't seem to be able to get any wins, particularly in regards to the shutdown, because the shutdown is largely about healthcare payments. They are constantly bamboozled and constantly wrong-footed, and that's why we are in this different paradigm of politics, where it's Trump against everyone and no one at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's really bad news for the Democrats that the news agenda can be dominated by disagreements between Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene. If the Democrats were doing any better, the news would be dominated by a genuine pushback or a real challenge that the Democratic Party was presenting to Trump and to MAGA and to the Republican Party as it stands now. And they're just not there. They're just not setting the news agenda at all. It is harder in America, right? Because you don't have leaders of the party in the way that the UK does when you're in opposition. That you don't have somebody setting the tone from the top down. You just have people trying to vie for that spot, but nobody's doing it very well. I mean, there has been some strange praise of California's Governor Gavin Newsom trying to tweet like Trump and trying to talk like Trump. I mean, it's just awful. It's just really, really bad. It was like not even that funny for one day. And the fact that that is at the moment, I would say, their best attempt to try to take on Trump and his Republican Party just shows that they are in no position to set the news agenda. And it is tricky because I think some of the people who might stand a real chance in 2028, somebody like Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, he's going to be nervous about his economic line. He's not going to want to commit to too much too quickly. If anything, the Democrats probably want to wait until people feel the full impact of these tariffs to come out against them, because, as you say, Freddie, they are nervous to be seen as, you know, sort of the internationalists or the people who aren't talking about American jobs at home, because Trump has done a very successful job in creating that narrative. I think it's deeply flawed, but he's done a very good job of selling it. They're probably waiting for more pain to set in. But how long do you wait? Midterms are not that far away now. You know, we're talking a year. And that will be a critical moment for the Democrats in just setting up momentum for what could come after Donald Trump's second term.
Saying that Donald Trump is on a roll internationally, which of course he does seem to be because of Gaza, that is one big win, it seems, for now. We wait and see what will actually happen. And certainly he seems to have bent the rest of the international political class to his will in many ways. However, the picture, you've already mentioned Venezuela, the possibility of covert military action in Venezuela. For now, MAGA seems very behind this. It feels like the kind of war they want to fight. We've done a cover piece in Spectator World about this. But that could easily become a mess quite quickly. That could easily unravel quite quickly. And then you have this odd situation going on in Argentina where a man dear to your heart, Javier Milei, who you interviewed last year for The Spectator, he, having seemed to have been quite successful, and actually I think we can say fairly, he has had some successes in trying to rebalance the Argentinian economy. He's suddenly facing quite a lot of political problems at home. He had a bad set of elections, and the Argentinian economy is in trouble. And Donald Trump has offered this rather odd strings-attached loan based on his election results, I think. So he will get Argentina will get $20 billion from America if Milei wins some elections. And this seems to, this very transactional Trump approach, it's a bit odd, isn't it?
It's very Trumpian. It certainly is very Trumpian. I think what President Milei is trying to do in Argentina is it's a cause that's certainly dear to my heart, overthrowing what has been essentially almost a century's worth of socialism that the Argentines have had to live under. But President Milei knew that he was coming into a situation that was frankly near impossible politically. But one of the reasons he was elected is there was an understanding that things would have to get slightly more painful before they could get better. And that meant that to curb inflation, you're going to have to create some kind of temporary recession. And that happened. And actually, it happened quite quickly. And Argentina came out of it. And it was predicted early this year to have the highest growth in South America, I believe. So there have been a lot of good news stories coming out of Argentina, the significant slowdown of inflation, investors pouring in money. There's been very, very positive cases to make. But I think one of the real challenges for Milei, which perhaps we're now, as we come up to the October elections, we're going to find out what his voters really think, is that a lot of his mission hasn't been sold in the usual political terms that one would normally do so. He speaks in a very blunt way. He speaks in a very harsh way. That chainsaw, that internationally seen chainsaw, said everything. And it was interesting, Elon Musk, who adopted the chainsaw, came out a while after, I think this was after he left Trump's government, and he said maybe that was actually not as thoughtful as one could have been. And he wasn't criticizing Milei. He was speaking about himself and the way that Americans saw it. But there have been a lot of political challenges for Milei because he has been slashing spending. He's been cutting benefits to try to get spending and the economy back on track in Argentina. There have been a lot of strings attached to a lot of things happening in Argentina. One of the ways he got the bailout from the IMF this spring was on the condition that he would continue to cut spending and he would continue to try to open the economy. These are things he wants to do. You don't have to twist Javier Milei's arm to do these things. He believes in them fundamentally. He's an economist first and foremost, and he is a free market, small L liberal. So he's happy to do them. But, you saw in the UK, a couple months ago, how near impossible it was impossible to cut £5 billion worth of welfare spending. In the US, there's a debate over the government shutdown is happening because America's reached its debt ceiling. Whatever happens, it will raise again and again and again. Cutting spending is really difficult. So Milei was able to tackle a lot of Argentina's woes, but now he needs this money. He needs these bailouts. Particularly, he needs US dollars in order to keep being able to pay off the very, very heavy debt burden that Argentina currently suffers from. And that is because they've needed so many bailouts over the years because the economy's been in such a dire place. So he has been incredibly reliant on his friendship and his personal relationship with Donald Trump to try to put all of these pieces into place. Consider this the next phase, but without the US, it would be near impossible to do. I don't think any of it is terribly controversial until you get to the Trump administration's argument that the money only comes with a particular elected official. That is meddling to the highest extreme. Now, would it be unreasonable for the American government to say, look, we don't want to help a socialist or communist government with whom we severely disagree, flourish and get back on track? That's, again, a slightly different point, though, to actually suggest that you need this man to be elected by a group of people that are not your citizens is obviously where this gets very controversial. And as I said, incredibly Trumpian. And it's not necessarily obvious that Argentines will look at this and think to themselves, gosh, we always agree with Donald Trump, so we must vote for Javier Milei's party. It could definitely backfire. Barack Obama coming over to the UK telling Brits that they'd be at the back of the queue if they voted for Brexit definitely backfired. So the money may be good news. The instruction from a foreign president to vote a certain way, and maybe that's a slight exaggeration on my part, but the strong indication that they should vote a certain way, that may backfire. This is a very tricky time for Javier Milei. And I think in retrospect, it was almost going too well. I mean, the economy was turning around. People were getting really excited. And the fact that in recent months, investors have got nervous. They're nervous because they're not sure if Argentines are going to continue to elect people and governments that will continue to slash and deregulate. There were always going to be political challenges. And if Milei is very disappointed in these elections, it will be because he tackled the politics too late. The economics, he was ready to tackle. The politics were much harder. But perhaps this $20 billion from the U.S. government will give him that push that he needs for his party to get it over the line.
Do Milei's problems not speak to a broader problem that affects developing countries? It affects developed countries at the moment, which is that it's very hard to create an economic feel-good factor among the people. You can get international business can be excited about the turnaround on the Argentinian economy. It's very hard to get people to feel that they are better off, even if you can point to statistics suggesting they are. And we see Trump having this same problem. He's going to talk a lot about how much revenue the tariffs have brought in. The American economy, there's as I said earlier, mixed signals on what's going on there at the moment. But certainly Americans, if you look since halfway through the Trump administration, or certainly the end of the COVID pandemic, the American economy has been sort of turbocharged in many ways, but people don't feel better off. They feel that inflation, the cost of living, has cost them dearly, and they are not happy economically. We see the same throughout Europe, really, and in Britain as well. It's not just that the economies are stagnant, it's that when they're not stagnant, people still feel they are.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Freddie.
Oh,
I think
good.
it's really well, I think it's really difficult to convince people to feel a certain way based on numbers on a spreadsheet. Um, you need to give people time to actually feel the benefits of your changes. You need to give people hope that the future is going to be better. I think that's one of the big issues in America when you look at some of the polling, especially leading up to the election last year, because a lot of Democrats were saying, well, look, inflation has been really bad under Joe Biden, but also look at economic growth. And Americans were saying, the Wall Street Journal did a great piece on this last year, they were saying, well, we can see these numbers, but we're just not at all secure about our future. We are not at all convinced that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be in a better place. Now, how do you make somebody feel differently? I think Argentina is a very interesting example of this, because on the flip side, if things get bad enough, if people are struggling to the point where they can't afford to live, they don't know when they go to the shops how much more expensive something's going to be the next day or the next couple of days, then they're willing to take a punt on somebody who comes from a totally different perspective. And Javier Milei, he describes himself as an anarcho-capitalist. How many people get elected describing themselves openly as anarcho-capitalists? He is a libertarian in the truest, most pure sense of the word, and they were willing to try that because things had got so bad. But when you are trying to recover from that kind of situation, there are going to be trade-offs about how people are feeling, for better or worse. So inflation radically slowing down, people are feeling a lot better about that, but it requires a recession. That's painful. How long you can ask people to be in that cycle of pain? I think, we're jumping all around the world here, but I think this is where the UK has gotten into so much trouble. When was the last time that a politician stood up and said, actually, things are pretty good, so we're able to cut this tax, and we're able to spend a bit more here, and we're able to do this and that, we can build some more stuff? When was the last time the chancellor stood up and was in a position to say anything positive? All people have heard in the UK for, I would say, well over a decade now, is things are really bad, and we've got to fix it, and we've got you have to come with us on this journey. And David Cameron got away with it. He actually won in 2015. He won an election because he had brought people through pain and said there's another side of this. But then the pain just continued, and it's now 2025. So I think that there is, I think that people have to feel like at some point something's going to turn around. And the huge question for Javier Milei is about 2 years into, I believe it is about 2 years into, just under, into his leadership. Will people feel like, okay, things should be really getting better now? Or will people understand that this is going to be a medium-term to long-term journey for Argentina, which was in such a bad way? I think the Americans, we have far less of a tolerance, and we don't like those long timelines. And Americans love to wipe out one party, bring in another. This idea, you spoke about hubris before, that, everyone's going to be MAGA now, and the world's going to be America's going to be run by Republicans now. I mean, forget it. This to me is the strangest thing about the Trump administration's thinking and the way they present these things. Like, Americans will vote for Democrats again. I can't tell you which one, and I can't tell you in which year, and I can't tell you how it's going to go, but I can guarantee you that Americans will vote for the Democrats again. And when they're in power, we'll vote for the Republicans again. That's what we like to do. We don't have a lot of tolerance for being asked to deal with one thing or have one sort of agenda for a long period of time. And I think that any politician, Trump included, who isn't a little bit more concerned about that, is slightly deluding themselves into thinking that we're in some kind of new normal. In America these days, there's no normal. We're always switching it up.
But if you listen to Eric Trump, for instance, the son of one of Donald Trump's sons, His father's greatest gift is this power of positive thinking. He's a disciple of Norman Vincent Peale, the great kind of positive thinker. And it is true that Trump is able to bend, I've used this phrase already, but bend reality to his will because he is so relentlessly positive. And perhaps it sort of moves over into hubris sometimes. But if you look at Gaza, I mean, that is a great example of Team Trump just saying, yes, we will get it done. Yes, we will get it done. Everybody saying, no, it can't possibly be done, can't possibly be done. And obviously, again, it's too early to say for sure. But it does mean that he is able to shift the conversation in ways that no other politician on earth, it seems, can do.
No, I agree. It's an incredible strength of Donald Trump's to say, I'm going to do something. And then he does it, he pulls it off. But I think the mistake that sometimes is made is thinking that there really is no check or balance on him, that he can do whatever he wants. If anything, that the lesson from what he's just done in creating the ceasefire and the incredible work that his son-in-law, Steve Witkoff, put into this is actually that the art of the deal, the ability to make deals and to be pragmatic and realistic about them, is really what Donald Trump is very good at, and instructing people to do that on his behalf. But what he's done is he has brought people together. That sounds corny, but I mean, he has, and like in the truest sense, he has brought people together to come to a conclusion of something. And in this case, the conclusion means hopefully far, far, far fewer people dying. And what we shouldn't take away from this is that Trump snaps his fingers and he gets what he wants. Trump snaps his fingers and everybody bows down to him. Some of those world leaders on the stage were being slightly embarrassing and practically bowing down to him. But what he actually secured was a deal. And I think the hubris comes in is, he takes that and then he brings it into other aspects of politics and policy. And he forgets that there is a world where he may not be in charge, where his party may not be in charge, where his VP or his sons or his family may not be in charge. And there will be other people who control the IRS. There will be other people who control the Department for Homeland Security. There will be other people who control the National Guard. And what precedent do you want to set? Because you're not, like, there are checks and balances on your power. You will not be president in a couple of years' time. We have free and fair elections. Things change in this country. And I think the hubris comes in him thinking, well, if I could do that, then I can do absolutely anything I want. And it really isn't the case, particularly in America. That really, really isn't the case. And I mean, one of my biggest fears is, certain Democrats looking what Trump's doing now saying, that looks fantastic. I can't wait until I get my hands on that and my party gets our hands on that. And Trump going after his political opponents, fantastic. He's normalizing it even more so than we did when we went after him. This is not all in Trump's control. So, I mean, absolutely celebrate what I think is again, we don't want to speak too soon, but if the ceasefire holds, we should celebrate what is a miracle and what is an incredible achievement on Donald Trump's part. And we should not think that means that Trump is some kind of God who can bend the entire world to his will without consequence, because he can't. And he knows it deep down because he admitted himself this week that he doesn't think he's going to heaven.
I don't think there's anything going to get me in heaven. Okay, I really don't. I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. I may be in heaven right now as we fly in Air Force One. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make heaven.
What a remarkable intervention from him.
Yeah, that was an extraordinary statement. I think actually I was going to wrap it up there, but I think we probably should reflect a little bit on that. I think that's to do with, we were talking about it among our Spectator World colleagues. We think it might be to do with his evangelical advisors. And some sense that he may have that he's led a sinful life and that his mission now is to be redeemed. And he certainly, since the failed assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania last year, he seems to be far more concerned about the next life, as it were, and far more of a religiously minded being. I think he's been a Christian for some time, but he seems far more aware of it now. What did you think of those remarks?
Well, at first I thought they were throwaway remarks, and I thought he was as he often does, making a joke. And Trump will poke fun at himself, and he's at his best when he does. And then when we were talking about it, Freddie, and reflecting on it, I did start to think, gosh, this is maybe a lot heavier, and one of the more relatable things perhaps he's ever said. I mean, who among us who's like really, taken a moment for reflection hasn't thought to themselves, oh, maybe I'm not redeemable, maybe I'm not good enough. We don't usually get that kind of narrative from the president. He's always the best president we've ever had. He's always the greatest human being alive. I guess it was a very fast little insight into the fact that, in his quieter and slightly darker moments, maybe he doesn't really believe that wholeheartedly. Maybe we're putting way too much weight on what was a throwaway comment. But I agree with you, Freddie. It's something he's definitely been thinking about a lot more and makes more references to since he was nearly killed.
Well, we wouldn't be journalists if we didn't read too much into throwaway comments.
That's right.
So, Kate, great pleasure as ever. I hope this won't be the last time you appear on Americana. I hope the Washington Post will let you.
I really hope not. Yeah, I really hope you'll have me back, Freddie.
Of course, always. We must get you back on soon. All the best, Kate.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.